Welcome to segment 3, Gold and Black Live, joined by Steve Wiltfong with On 3 and does recruiting and transfer portal vice president with On 3. And Steve, it is never a dull moment in your world, just because this is forever a ongoing process. We'll talk about Purdue specifically, but just kind of what's keeping you busiest right now? Is it more recruiting related stuff? Portal's quiet, sort of, but never really totally quiet. What has been your main thrust here over the last few weeks?
Yeah, right now it's just keeping up with the big recruiting weekends across the landscape of college football. Each week there's a few schools that are hosting top recruiting targets, so that's kind of where I zero in my focus. Who are the big prospects? Where are they going? And then how did those visits resonate with these prospects?
You know, one of the challenges of a season that Purdue's having right now at 1-4 and really problematic as well. We've had several decommitments. Not necessarily surprising, because some of them are a year or two down the road. But just what challenges when coaches are in that way and in this environment where it's not that anything goes, but there's just a lot of fluidity to all of it. What do you see there in terms of trying? You as a coach, you want to try to hang on to these guys, but it's tough when the wind is blowing against you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the biggest challenge is when you're recruiting against other schools. They're pointing towards your record. They're pointing towards the fact that you're 120th in total offense and 119th in total defense. And, those are tough things sometimes to navigate. But every coach on this Purdue coaching staff also has a track record of success in their past that they can point to and say, look, we're recruiting you to help get this thing right on track. And I know it's not easy, but you got to stay in touch with these recruits. You got to stay positive. You got to continue to tell them, hey, you're coming to West Lafayette to help turn this thing around and get it going. And we've seen Purdue going, 2022, 2021, those were good football teams, 9 wins, 8 wins, that played in some exciting bowl games at the end of the campaign. And so you're selling your track record of what you've done in the past, and you being the guys that can come in and play right away and help get Purdue back on track in the Big Ten.
Does it, and with the portal, obviously Purdue, Indiana, there's been a lot of schools at that level. Now, Indiana's a ranked team and in the top third, maybe the Big Ten right now. But just in terms of, do you ever see a day? Do you see a day where schools like Purdue, I mean, is it going to be more in the transfer portal, I suppose, or is it going to be, do you find a sweet spot number that you try to get? Does it all depend on roster development?
Well, to me, Purdue's a program that's always going to be a developmental program. You're finding guys with high upsides, and then you're developing them within your scheme and your culture. And then in today's landscape, you got to have a collective and a NIL setup that retains good players, which they weren't able to do with the top pass rusher in the conference last year, but they were able to do with Dylan Thieneman, So we've seen some wins for Purdue in roster retention. We've seen some losses. That's going to be for everybody, but generating revenue to keep your good players that you're developing through your program, guys that were maybe overlooked on the trail by the Ohio States and the Oregons and the USCs of the world, because those are Big Ten programs, and bringing them to Purdue, guys that are high upside recruits that fit your culture, fit what you do schematically. And then you're going to go into the portal each year and probably land 10 guys that you think can be difference makers to your 2 deep as well. That's going to be the recipe for Purdue moving forward. It's not easy, but certainly we're seeing all over college football every year that there's programs like Purdue having success. And, it's hard to sustain success, but Purdue, the track record, the amount of people that they've sent to the NFLs, the way they fill the stadium on Saturdays, there's no reason why Purdue can't be a football team that's exciting most football seasons.
You look at obviously all the talk about the House decision and House settlement, I should say, and the $22 million. Give us your crystal ball of where that all shakes. How does that all shake out? There's still a lot of moving parts to that. And do you think this will help schools like Purdue? Will it level the playing field, or will it always be Ohio State and Alabama with more market value and transfer and NIL opportunities? I mean, how do you view it coming down?
Well, I always view that any rule change always helps the powerhouse programs. Doesn't mean that it can't trickle down and help a place like Purdue, but certainly anytime that they change a rule or whatever, it seems to always be in favor of the Ohio States of the world. That's just the land. That's how the real world works too.
Yeah.
You know, so it's how it works in college football. Even though they try to create a semblance of fairness with the rules that they put into place. It seems like all these rules always seem to cater to the powerhouse programs first and foremost, but that doesn't mean that Purdue can't find a recipe for their own success. Yeah. And it starts with a great coaching staff. I mean, you look down at Indiana right now, I know that's the hated Oak and Bucket rival, but Curt Cignetti's obviously a hell of a football coach. Let's put a hell of a football staff around him, and he's got support from the administration, and they've started this season hot. They're playing at a high level on both sides of the ball. They did well in the transfer portal. Their portal guys hit this year. Now, a lot of them were guys that they were familiar with that came and followed from James Madison University. But there's a recipe for Purdue to have a good season like that. And unfortunately, it's just not lining up for them right now.
Yeah, you look at Cignetti and just the fact that do you see with coaches that ability, and it was built in for him because he obviously took a lot of kids with him from James Madison, but somehow finding familiarity. I mean, it just seems to me that's a thing where and I can't speak to the, Purdue's had several, had a large transfer portal class ranked, I think 10th by On3 and on all of that. It hasn't panned out well, but getting familiarity and understanding what you're getting, is that going to be a trend down the road? It's very difficult to speed date your way through this and know what the heck you're getting by the time these kids show up on campus, the portal kids.
Well, creating a culture within your program where it's player-led, obviously the coaches set the foundation, but the players' buy-in is so strong that they're holding themselves accountable when they're going through workouts and doing off-season stuff. And even when they're pouring into their next opponent, that's player-led motivation. That's always going to be your best government in your locker room. And then certainly scheme after that, scheming first down, scheming easy ball movement up and down the field, playing hard, fast, and physical on defense. And again, all easier said than done. But when you put together the right staff that knows how to set a culture, knows how to get the players to buy into what you're doing week in and week out, and then you're putting together game plans each week that are ones that they can digest, ones that they can go out and execute, you're going to have a lot of success. And again, that's why the top coaches rise to the top and some coaches stop rising.
It's interesting that there's been a lot of debate around Purdue, the whole thing about head coaching experience, and of course, like you mentioned, the fact that Indiana's having the year it's having doesn't make it easier for Purdue fans, but just that ability, Ryan Waller's at age 38, a head on a swivel guy, a lot of energy. One would think that could put you in a good position to be a 21st century coach or a 2024, 25 coach. But do you put more now value maybe on that experience? How do you look at that if from that standpoint and what you're seeing with transfer portal moves and recruiting moves around the country?
Well, we've seen some good hires from the assistant coach ranks come right in and hit the ground running at major powerhouse programs. Obviously, Kirby Smart did that at Georgia. Dan Lanning, who Purdue's going to play in a couple weeks, has done that at Oregon. And I think even to a lesser degree, you see guys like Alex Golish come in and to USF and inject some excitement into those programs. So I don't necessarily think you have to have been a head coach beforehand to hit the ground running in your first ever head coach job. But with all that being said, oftentimes track record of a head coach, they earn these opportunities at the next stages. They have to go out there and prove themselves again. And I think right away, Coach Cignetti at Indiana has been able to show that he's more than qualified for that job. You flip the script down to Florida, Billy Napier.
Yeah.
He was a terrific coach at the University of Louisiana, had some of the most successful seasons in Raging Cajun history right away, came right in and took him to the conference title game at Louisiana. He earned that job at Florida. And it's been a bit up and down. Now, he's still writing his script. I think most people would have Florida on the hot seat right now, but they got a chance to go out and play well in October and November and erase all of that, and I hope they do. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes a head coach that's done great on various levels isn't always the guy on the next level as well. Hell, you guys saw that with Coach Hazel at Purdue. But Coach Brom did a good job at Purdue. You guys were competitive year in and year out. I just wish, for Coach Brom, he just takes the roster you give him and maximizes them.
Yeah.
If he went out and poured a little more into roster acquisition, he'd be a deadly coach, because there's no question he's a hell of a football coach, and he maximizes the 85 scholarship guys you have in the walk-ons, and typically they have a good game plan each Saturday to go out and be competitive on Saturdays. But he wasn't someone that like particularly loved recruiting. And the thing is he's kind of an awesome dude, right? So if you kind of stuck Jeff Brom into living rooms more or into high school more, or on the phone more with recruits, he's someone that you resonate with as just like, this is a man's man that like runs a football program that would be fun to play in, that has a fun offense and kind of lets his defensive staff do their thing. But that's just not his, he's not comfortable in that space, I guess, for lack of better words. He does it he does it, but he's not pouring into it like a Dan Lanning or Kirby Smart or someone of that nature.
When you look at the whole coaching staff or coaching timeline, of course, there was some news about transfer portal windows I think in the spring, but is it sustainable for some of these guys? I mean, man, it is just a 24/7 job. I mean, you kind of live that in your world as well, but how, where do you see down the road that you can maybe soften the edges around this to make this a job that somebody can do over the long term? I mean, there's programs that do it, but it's really a tough job in terms of that 365-day-a-year opportunity that is college football head coaching.
I mean, these guys make a lot of money. Is
it
sustainable? Yeah.
Because
every day, every week, or every 2 weeks, when that money drops into their bank account, it's like, this is sustainable. It's a lifestyle I can get used to. Plus, they love it. I mean, most of these guys are football. They couldn't picture themselves doing anything else. It's just their routine. Sometimes they desk guard. They're in the office so much they don't even need to be in there anymore, but they're guarding their desks because it's just part of the culture and the DNA. But getting back to Purdue, I mean, you can look at some programs and point towards them and say, like, that's what we're trying to be at Purdue, Iowa State, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Those are programs that not all years are the same, but every year they are competitive. And it's because they have a culture and a foundation and a well that they go to. Very physical football teams. Iowa State's done a great job recruiting and developing the quarterback position. I think that's something that doesn't get said enough about what Matt Campbell and company have been able to do in Ames. But really, like, those are programs that Purdue can point to, because they're not going to be Ohio State. They're not going to be Michigan. It's just not set up that way. But they can be very competitive in the Big Ten, looking at like what Kentucky and Iowa State and programs like that do, even Kansas State, and say, like, which one are we? What's our identity? What are we trying to be? And then you just recruit to it every year.
Yeah. And that's been a challenge, obviously, for Ryan Walters. And certainly when you come off to a 1-4 start, makes it even more challenging. Okay, last question for you is
there's different kinds of 1-4s too, Alan. I mean, like, there's competitive 1-4s, and then there's.
And that's where Purdue is the non-competitive side right now.
Yeah.
No question. What about state of Indiana recruiting? You obviously live in the state and have worked the state, but also do it nationally. Just the emergence, and I think I ask you this about every time we have you on, about the level of Indiana high school football, and can it help feed the Indianas, the Purdues of the world long term? Is it getting even better from your perspective?
Well, I think if you look up and down NFL rosters, there's guys that are in the NFL that didn't necessarily even play Power 5 football when they came out of high school. So there's capable players that can come in and help your program win games, but you're still going to have to mine for talent in Georgia, in Florida, in Texas, in Ohio. And then obviously be a factor in Illinois and Missouri and St. Louis and places like that are also geographically potentially good for you at a place like Purdue.
Yeah, it's an ongoing battle. This is the storyline. Like you just said, you mentioned past coaches. It has always been a challenge for Purdue to be competitive. That's been the problem so far in this start, is that the last 4 games, especially the Boilermakers, have not been competitive, and you got to fix that.
Knowing a guy like Carson Steele, look, and we didn't hit on his ranking either, right? So it's not like I'm out here, but Carson Steele, if you go back and look at it, he was fantastic as a freshman and a sophomore. Got hurt as a junior, which probably hurt him on the trail. Came back and had a fantastic senior season. And then if you pull off another layer, he's extremely strong and hardworking, which if you're any of the state schools, you're visiting Center Grove and you're getting that report from Coach Eric Moore and that staff. Yeah. And then you're recruiting Carson Steele to Purdue, right? Or Indiana. And look, he could have played anywhere in the country. He's in the NFL. He's on the 2D for the Chiefs. So, but everyone missed except for Ball State, right? But I'm just saying, like, finding guys like that. My man from Fishers who went to Eastern Illinois or whatever, that's in the NFL. I think he plays for the Commanders now. I'm drawing a blank on my man's name, but safety. But you go back and look at his senior film, and he's fantastic. He could have played at Ohio State with that senior film, but you just, guys get overlooked. But don't overlook those guys in your own state. Like double and circle back and make sure those guys didn't have senior years that weren't capable of playing for you, even though everybody overlooked them.
Yeah, interesting. Always an interesting study, and we appreciate your time, especially on a Friday, your only day that you can catch your breath to some extent in your world, and that's always challenging.
This time of year.
Yes, especially this time of year. Steve Wiltfong, Vice President of Recruiting and Transfer Portal for On3.com. We're glad he is on our team here and part of the On3 network. Okay, we want to thank WLFI and Madison as well, all the things that they've done for us to make sure that this broadcast gets on. State Farm agent Trent Johnson at TrentIsMyAgent.com, and XXX on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. We will have a show next week prior to that Oregon game. It will be a game day show, but we'll look forward to that. Steve, thanks again. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we appreciate your time so much. Stay tuned, and we'll look forward to next week's show on Gold and Black Live.